Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last module. Apologies, since if you're seeing this video, this is out of because I'm stuck here in Austin, Texas today. So I do apologize for not being there and able to present this live. Anyway, this was originally this was the closing module, of this past semester. So I think just remember today's objectives have to do with just summarizing what we've learned this semester, and then how these ideas can come together in a proposal. Even though that proposal is outside of the scope of this course, I do try to introduce it, but mostly within the confines of what qualitative research is. Okay, I will suggest that you all make sure you go to the PhD Center and on Blackboard and see the steps involved in proposal and what you need for proposal defense. But either way, just remember that at least if you're writing a qualitative proposal, think back to what you've learned in this course, right? And this is what we'll be going over today. So, in summary, remember there's a couple of big components in a qualitative research design, and what you do, right, in within a develop or when developing a qualitative research project. First of all, you got to identify your problem, right? This usually kind of falls along the lines of what is your interest and what have you. This is where you pull out the literature, right, and see what the state of science is, and just see what's been done up until that point. And not only that, this is where you begin to start thinking about what you're adding to the science itself. Closely associated with this is actually also the purpose of the study. This is, in the beginning sections of any design or any proposal or grant. You usually start thinking about, what's the problem, your interest, the purpose of the study that you're doing, and also, and this is if and only if you're not developing a theory, for, let's say using grounded theory or something. You're usually going to use a theoretical framework to guide your study. I think the flexibility with qualitative research really allows some work to be done without a framework, or at least if it's in non-grounded theory designs or projects. But either way, you really kind of use a theoretical framework to kind of guide you through, the qualitative research process. After you've looked at all that, then you kind of think about, your research question. Sure, your research question was probably written before you developed your actual proposal. But the thing is that I think after you do the steps of identifying the problem, clearly stating the purpose of your study, then, if you use a theoretical framework, how that will guide your study, then you kind of go back and see if anything in those processes, right, like the lit review background, does that change the research question, right? And closely associated, I've been saying this all semester, we actually, select the qualitative approach based on the research question, right? Or what design will best answer your research question. I think at this point too is where you start thinking about methodologies, right? You've selected your approach. You start to begin on what kind of participants you're going to need for your study. And secondly, you start developing how you're going to recruit this particular participant. You got to remember, you got to think about inclusion exclusion criteria, and you got to make it so specific in the sense of, does this give you the best data, and does it also answer your research questions? And then just to continue what we were talking about, other elements of what should, or other elements in a qualitative research design has to do with maintenance of rigor. Right. I think one of the best ways to discuss rigor is probably through the use of the trustworthiness concept. So I would definitely bring that in this particular section. You also need to talk about, your data collection processes, right? I think this is where you really need to be clear because I know in other proposal defenses that I've sat on, I think this has been probably the most challenging um, for some people because uh, maybe it's a lack of experience about how to collect qualitative data or just having to think about all the what ifs happen that can happen, right? So I think but just remember, just have maybe a plan in place in case you can't collect the data that you need. But what the best way to do that is to make sure that you um, have a spot in your timeline or trajectory in how you execute your study to make sure you pause a little bit and just kind of check in to make sure that you and your team are collecting the data that they need. If not, there may be time for a refinement. But either way, at least for the plan and the proposal itself or in a grant, this is where you really try not to be overly ambitious because I think that would probably raise a red flag on anyone being able to complete a study in the allotted timeline or allotted time, right? Which is basically from proposal defense to the time that you get that you actually complete the project itself. Anyway, I think in here, and this is, I don't want to say it's exactly new, but definitely, and there's always templates for this. So, because I know I've even struggled with it when this requirement was put in place in grants, and that's just your data management. How are you going to basically store the data or ensure confidentiality, anonymity, make sure your data is de-identified, make sure your code books and things like that are locked and secure. Those are the kinds of things that you want to see. And I think where the big thing comes into is that a lot of journals nowadays, or even funders, as I've been hearing, but I haven't met any funders that have asked this of me. But it's either way of what depository you're going to use, right? Because that's where you upload your data. I mean, there's always exceptions or additional requirements, so just make sure that you kind of keep on top of that. Obviously, nothing can be done with IRB approval, right? Now, I think I put this late or in this late stage, the number 11 here, right? And this is not I mean, it is kind of sequential and kind of in order, but remember, sometimes you kind of have to go back and maybe refine something that you probably saw, let's say, as you were doing your data collection plan or your data analysis plan, and you needed to go back because maybe it kind of falls out of that flow from your lit review or background sections. Anyway, so and nothing can be done in without IRB approval. And these are the up until this point, you're probably going to uh, really up until this point, and anything that we talked about, in this particular these two slides, anything up to here, you have to um, make sure that, or basically it's what IRB wants included in their protocols. Now again, keep on top of that. This they can be this particular discussion can be outdated probably next week for all we know. But the thing is, just keep on top of all the IRB requirements and things like that, especially if you're post defense and things like that, to make sure you get your study started on time. And then I think also one thing that you also need to think about is how are you going to discuss your findings, right, with the rest of your team members. I think we went if you remember, not too long ago, we talked about how you go back and you kind of talk about, the categories, themes, or just basically how you interpreted the data. Discuss that with other team members to make sure that everyone is on the same page, essentially. In regards to your data. And then lastly is prepare a data report for dissemination. I've provided a sample of what a data report looks like, and your assignment as well, um, which is probably a little bit of a condensed version of a data report, but nonetheless, just I think the assignment would be, instead of you creating a data report, I think I'm going to change it just because it might be a little bit a little bit too much work. So if you want, if you've done a data report already, by all means submit it. But if not, it is an optional at this point of this course. So just in summary, right? Why use qualitative research, right? Well, remember, it captures anything that's not numbers, right? Anything it basically studies processes of how you arrived at a situation that you're observing, right? Again, it captures the way people interpret their interaction in various contexts. And what that means is, just like you can follow someone's lived experience, for lack of a better term, but anyway, someone's lived experience in whatever context they may find themselves in. Qualitative research helps understand that trajectory, right? That lived experience. Again, remember, lived experience is pretty close and situated within a phenomenological approach, but there's other ways. But either way, it's someone's experience is what qualitative research helps with. Also, remember, it's the social reality is what we're looking at, right? Because we want to see what that person or group, what they experience and what their realities are, right? There's a lot of adage about the step or walking in someone else's shoes, or walking a mile in someone else's shoes to understand what they're going through. I think it's an extension of that, right? Again, it focuses on the social reality of an experience. What was the person? How did they interact with those contents, or within that context, excuse me. And then also just what were their feelings, what were the experiences, what did they interpret in that experience itself. And lastly, I think and this is kind of the way that I really use qualitative research, it delineates what I call cultural components of individuals and groups, right? What is culture, I guess, is the question, right? Now, again, the way that I see culture is something that's always changing, never stays the same, isn't static, so on and so forth. But either way, qualitative research um, helps me capture that particular experience of someone, right? How what defines their culture, and what have you. Now, again, that's only one way of looking at culture. I mean, there's many different theoretical frameworks of culture, but the way that I use it is that I think it's very context dependent, and it's based and an experience is based on that interaction between context and individual, or context and groups, or even you kind of mesh it all in. It could be individual, group, and within a particular context. But it just helps measure that particular, what I call, remember, intangible information. And again, this slide is just, remember, we focused on five of the qualitative approaches, right? Again, the case study, the ethnography, the grounded theory, a narrative analysis, and a phenomenology. But as well, also remember that there's other approaches as well, right? There's historical reviews, or historical analysis, definitely content analysis, a discourse analysis, narrative report, something that's biographical or autobiographical, and also I really wouldn't include it as an approach. Some people do, but either way, participatory action research is one way of looking at, or it can, it can be in some circles be seen as an actual approach or design in itself. So again, this goes, again into, some of the key elements of qualitative research, right? Why it's used, I guess, would be a way of saying this, a way of describing, qualitative research elements, right? It definitely helps with exploration of circumstances of processes. Remember, it's processes is probably a mechanism that's or looked at with qualitative research, or best explained or examined with qualitative research. It gives a better understanding of those processes, right? I think some buzzwords that always get thrown out are, qualitative research is holistic, it can be interpretive, it can be iterative. It really helps uh, uh, participants become part of the project itself, right? To be really involved. I call it actively engagement or active engagement in these research processes. But again, I think that comes just as a side note. As a community-based participatory action researcher, I really find, or I'm really interested in participants being involved in all aspects of the research from project design all the way down to the dissemination piece. And then also it gives researchers to be an opportunity to be an instrument. So what does that mean? Well, you're actually involved in your own research. You're not this like separate analyst or anything like that. Like, if you're running statistical tests or anything that you're doing quant stuff. But either way, it gives researchers an opportunity to be an instrument, to be one with their work. And again, just another quick list of, differences between quantitative, qualitative. Again, you might hear somebody that says otherwise, and they might be absolutely correct. But either way, so remember, quantitative tends to be guided by theoretical frameworks. Not saying that qualitative isn't, but I'm just saying that that's just really a key characteristic, key component of quantitative stuff. You have to remember you're examining potential relationships, right? It's deductive, and not only that, it's generalizable. Remember, qualitative research is not meant to be generalizable. I mean, there's a big difference between generalizability and generalizable, definitely. And I think one thing that we can't argue with, one of the biggest strengths of quantitative stuff is they allow large sample sizes. Unfortunately, though, you have to remember in qualitative stuff we can't, because we get so much data from a small number of people. So I'm not saying that it's not doable, but it's just not really feasible to have really large sample sizes. And I feel comfortable with saying, more than 25, 30 participants is already a pretty large sample size for qualitative stuff. Anyway, so more specifically about qualitative stuff, remember it helps with theoretical development, right? I think that's the key difference there between, just something being guided by theoretical frameworks. But qualitative not only can be guided by theoretical frameworks, but it also helps with formulating a theory, especially if there's not one that can explain the processes that you're examining or that you looked at. Remember, it uses observations and interviews as data itself. It's inductive. What I think one of the best one of the best um, elements of qualitative is that it allows for delineation of context, right? Just take a look around at the room, right? Now there's, qualitative approaches have really been successful in guiding you and being able to direct you into how you should be looking at a phenomena, right? And then also, remember, the biggest thing, and I think I've been saying this all the semester, is flexibility. I think that's the best thing about qualitative approaches is it allows maximum flexibility. Now, again, got to be careful here. I'm not saying that qualitative is the only type of research approach or the best research approach. I'm just saying that at least for someone like me, who's a community-based participatory action researcher, who really looks at understudied phenomena and hard to reach highly marginalized populations, qualitative because of that exploratory, uh, I guess, flavor that it tends to be used in or used for. That exploratory approach really kind of keeps me within the qualitative research space. All right. So remember, it could be a thing of I'm trying to develop theories. It could be a thing of I'm just trying to understand processes, or trying to understand the culture within a context, or I'm actually just trying to delineate or kind of make sense of what units of analyses are within a context itself. And I'll end with this particular slide. I think this semester I have really been kind of building my skill set, and one of as a educator. And one thing is I've seen the benefits of AI stuff. So I punched in the Google AI, and it's called Gemini now. It's gone through a couple of name changes already. But either way, so as of today, right? It's called Gemini. Anyway, so when you plugged in, I put in a prompt that said something, that kind of asked about nursing practice or qualitative research in nursing practice. And then it gave me these bullet points, and it's true, and it kind of checks out, right? It's basically what's in the literature, right? What does qualitative research do? How does that help nursing practice? One, it gives the people element to it, right? I don't think and I don't think it captured that, but either way, you have to remember we're that's important because we're the profession that spends the highest amount of time with the patient. So obviously it makes sense that a lot of the benefits of qualitative research and its aim to bring the humanity out of the numbers, right, out of the data. I'm not saying that's the exclusive reason, but I'm just saying one of those reasons we use qualitative research is putting the people or putting the person back in participant, right? Um, it really helps reveal attitudes and motivations. AI got that right. Definitely informs patient-centered care. And again, because of it, it speaks to the experience of someone. It also identifies healthcare obstacles because not everything can be captured in a survey or other type of data collection strategies, right? Sometimes obstacles are intangible, right? Like community stigma in my work, right? HIV stigma, that kind of stuff. It supports evidence-based practice, right? It gives a different understanding to the respective unit of analyses, right? And then also it guides new research. Remember, qualitative is primarily used in exploratory activities, right? Or research activities, hence my work, right? So just remember that it puts the person, I think, because we are patient centered. We are the profession that really spends the highest amount of time with patient or clients. It really just fits nicely with that.